Hey everybody, I know I haven't gotten the chance to really update anyone in a long time, and this is really one of the first days that I've had any extra energy to do that, to, actually update people, because I've just been truly like beyond exhaustion up until this point, and I promised to tell you guys the good and the bad, and I haven't gotten the chance to tell people about the bad, about any of the stuff that's happened since I've been in the hospital, because once I started chemo, kind of all of my extra energy went away. So I'll just tell you guys kind of a little bit about the journey so far, since I haven't gotten to do that. So yeah, I'll just do that. Basically, when you have, and actually, obviously, chemotherapy has caused me to lose some hair, so I had to shave my head, because it was literally just coming out in clumps and clumps, just all over everywhere. My bed, the room, the shower. So I'm a little bit more bald than the last time I talked to you guys. But again, I just wanted to tell you guys, you've heard a lot about the good, but it has not been easy, to say the least. So what they do when you have acute myeloid leukemia, they have like two different stages of chemotherapy that they do. They have induction chemotherapy, and then they have consolidation after you're back home, and that's like mostly an outpatient thing at this point. But so what happens is they use two drugs. One of them is called cytarabine, and then the other one, I don't know, they call it the Red Devil, because I can't remember the dinacibin or something like that. They call it the Red Devil because it literally comes bright red in, one of these IV bags here. I have this my giant pole here with all my stuff on it, but what they do is they do a continuous infusion of cytarabine for 7 days in a row, where literally just 24/7 cytarabine's going into you, and then you also get the Red Devil, or what is it, man? Dinarubicibin or something like that. If anyone knows, tell me about it. But so anyways, so what happened is they did that, the Red Devil, whatever medication they do for like, I think it's like an hour or like a 2-hour push at a time, but they only do that for the first 3 days. And honestly, for most of the time I was getting chemotherapy, I felt a little bit cocky, because there wasn't much happening that was disrupting me, and I thought, you get chemotherapy and then bam, you get the symptoms, these other things right away. And that's not quite how it worked for me. The bad was that probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 days into chemotherapy, I got this thing called mucositis, which is basically are these like bright white dots. Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. You get these bright white dots on the back of your throat, and that was definitely the worst part of this for me, was 5 or so days into chemotherapy. Hey everyone, welcome. I'm a little bit balder than the last time you saw me. You get these bright white dots at the back of your throat, and your throat just kind of swells up, like my uvula, in the back there, like has like swelled up, and really at times, like I literally could not eat any food, and I could barely drink. And so there was like a solid, I don't know, like 7 or 8 days where I just didn't eat any food. And towards the end, they were talking about the end of that period, like, do we need to even consider an NG tube, like, which is nasogastric tube that goes down to do, to give you the nutrients that you need, right? But my throat got so bad. I mean, literally, like, I would swallow and it would be like I felt like I forgot how to swallow because, my tonsils were so big, swollen up, that, like, you could feel the liquid split, and then it hits all of those mucositis bumps on the way down. And, this mucositis can go from anywhere, any mouth sores, to literally, like, all the way down your esophagus. So it can be hell. And honestly, for those 5 or 6 days, it felt like hell to me. I mean, you can't do anything except, like, almost suffer during that time because the pain was so overwhelming. But thankfully we got, like, palliative care really involved. When people hear palliative care and they think, oh my gosh, that's like end of life care, but really it just means like symptom or pain management. And those doctors were just absolutely amazing. And the one doctor who came in from there was one of the first doctors that sat down and was like, but how are you, like, really doing? And I just, like, started bawling because I felt like they were some of the first people to, like, truly listen to, like, this is the pain I'm having, this is how much pain I'm having, and that was, like, a really beautiful thing to have acknowledged, right? To feel listened to in this time, and it wasn't even that I wasn't feeling listened to by my other doctors, but I didn't realize that, like, this deeper level of listening I was missing until this godsend of a woman who I don't even know her name just sat down and listened to me when I was just having this awful mucositis because I could barely talk. It was that bad. My throat was so swollen. And so during that, like, 7-ish day period, because chemotherapy stops after 7 days, but, like, this started, mucositis got really bad on day 4 or 5 of chemotherapy, and then it continued because there's still chemo in your system. And during that time, like, I couldn't talk to people, I couldn't eat any food, and so I think I lost anywhere from 15 to 20 pounds during that time. So, one of my doctors, being the blunt doctor that they were like, well, thank goodness you came in not as, like, a skinny mini, because then we'd have to be a lot more concerned about your nutrients, but you got some, weight there that we gave us the freedom. So, to not have to do an NG tube on top of my swollen throat, like, I can't think what that would have felt like to have, this NG tube down my throat with my swollen, like, uvula and my swollen throat, and then all of these bumps. Like, it would have just added to the awfulness. But thankfully, the palliative care doctors came in and they really worked out a pain management routine for me that really made the difference, because up until that point, like, it was uncontrolled pain. It didn't matter what they did. I was just, like, in pain 24/7, and it wasn't stopping. And so, so I promised to tell you the good and the bad, and that was definitely the worst part for me, was just how awful this mucositis was. And I know it was a pretty bad case of mucositis, but I've also made some friends, like, because they encourage you to walk around the halls here, and so I met one person whose mucositis case was even worse. Like, their tongue had swollen up, and I mean, literally they just couldn't get anything in. So I'm there is a blessing in the fact that it wasn't as bad as it could be. And so definitely God is gracious there. But so yeah, and so that 7-day period, like, I was hard to sleep, because you just wake up and your throat would be dry, and that's like the worst thing for mucositis, that just irritates it even more. So like you have to just like keep waking up, taking drinks, eating ice chips, anything like that to help the pain of the mucositis in your throat. And so it was hell for a little while there, but luckily, I'm still on this most favorable path for receiving treatment. Again, a little bit balder, which actually, again, with chemotherapy, right, like these effects were delayed, that I didn't even start losing my hair till, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago. So so that was really different for me, because I was like, oh, I must not be going to lose my hair. But in chemotherapy, you lose your hair because chemotherapy attacks fast-growing cells, right? Because that's what tumors are, that's what cancer is, are these fast-growing cells that start to outnumber your other ones. And so that's why they treat it with these drugs, like in my case, cytarabine and dynaruba something. And so yeah, that mucositis was definitely the worst part, and then it slowly, like very slowly, got better after that week of basically not being able to eat anything and barely being able to swallow. I also got like nosebleeds just all the time because your platelet levels are so low that you just start bleeding randomly. And for me, it was particularly my nose for some reason, which is apparently pretty common. And so they even have like, they know how to take care of nosebleeds. And if it gets super bad, they call in like a special team to come pack your nostrils. But luckily, my nosebleeds never got to that level. And so, you go through this first round of induction chemotherapy of 7 days of just continuously getting, a poison put into your blood. And then after that, basically, it just becomes a hurry up and wait game. Because you get a bone marrow biopsy again. They do one at the start, and then to get like a baseline, see where your numbers are at, and then they do another one after chemotherapy to basically make sure there's just no cells left in your bone marrow, like good or bad, so that your immune system has a chance to actually restart itself and do it in a manner where you're not having all these leukemic cells produced. Sorry, my nose still like constantly runs. It's just right now, luckily, they're not nosebleeds because my platelets are way up. But and so yeah, that next step is you get this bone marrow biopsy, which thankfully my provider who did that for me both times is just like a saint, and made sure that I had all the pain meds that I needed, and that basically both of the procedures were like a walk in the park. So I was really happy with that. But like the worst part is you get this bone marrow biopsy, and then it takes 4 or 5 days of waiting, right? Because the bone marrow biopsy then tells them, do you need to do another round of induction chemotherapy, which would be a little bit shorter, like 5 or 6 days, depending on what they think. And so you're just in this awful like waiting game of trying to figure out, like, do I have to go through all of that again? And like as we got closer and closer to the time when it was expected to get the information, like honestly my resolve started dissolving, because I was like, I don't know that I could do the mucositis thing again. Like it felt that traumatizing to me. And you know, obviously, I think I would have landed in the place where if I had to do it, like I would, because I would have to do it. And really, right, like that's where you find your strength sometimes, is just you just do it. And so the waiting for that was just awful, because we're trying to figure out, like, do I get to start the recovery process and come home, or do they have to do more chemotherapy? And so we finally got these results, right, that, like, you know, if you've followed the Facebook group, you know, it's out there that my bone marrow biopsy came back with like less than 5% of the blast cells, those leukemic cells, were left, and all my other cells were like gone too. So that's a good thing. You want your bone marrow to basically be clean before they start the recovery process. And so that was like this huge initial relief, because I was like, oh God, thank you so much that I don't have to do another round of that chemotherapy. So huge blessing there. But then, like, you know, I didn't realize the next day that there would be like this huge mindset shift that, like, I just didn't expect it to be there, right? Because basically you go from this battle where you're fighting something that feels external to you, like, oh, I'm fighting leukemia. You know, like I'm fighting against this thing that I can at least project to be outside of me, even though it's really inside of my bone marrow and it's really me. But like, so you go from this mindset of fighting and battling and like hardened resolve to now I'm just waiting, and I'm just waiting for my numbers to recover. And that was probably the time that I was, you know, most depressed or most down, was that like sudden mind shift change, because I was just like, well, there's nothing specifically right to do. There's nothing necessarily to fight in that moment. And really, I'm just fighting to get my bone marrow to start producing stuff. And so, and that's kind of where we're at now. My numbers are starting to come up enough that, like, you know, they're starting to talk about discharge and being able to go home. And so that's really motivating, and that's really exciting. So it definitely helps with like mood and stuff. But like, I mean, literally, you know, now I'm on day like what, 27 or 28 of being in the hospital. On the 30th, it'll be 30 days here. Or no, on the 25th. What's today? Yeah, on the 25th, so 2 more days. I'll be in the hospital for 30 days. And I'll tell you what, it can be like incredibly depressing. So that like you're just literally doing nothing other than waiting right now. And so yeah, again, just trying to be real and open and honest with you guys, because I told people we tell you the good and I tell you the bad, because maybe someone can learn something from this. You know, maybe someone else who has AML someday will watch these videos. I might like put them up on YouTube or something. But you know, I really wanted to do more videos to give more like step-by-step guidance of what was happening, but like the exhaustion level was so much. I mean, I had no extra energy. Like there's like exhausted, and then there's chemo exhausted. Because it literally just takes everything out of you to not have an immune system and not have your own platelets, and to be needing platelets, transfusions, and blood transfusions. And I think between those two, I think I got maybe like 5 or 6 transfusions during the time that I've been here. And yeah, also my mom just said, hey, that I was in the hospital without visitors, family, or friends. which obviously makes this infinitely harder, right, to like keep a positive mindset, which is really key at this, well, at really any type of recovery, right? Like hope is the thing that keeps you going. And so yeah, like you do the chemotherapy. I got hit with this really bad mucositis, and then you get hit with like, oh, you have to wait for these bone marrow results for 5 days or whatever, and then you get hit again with like this mindset change of like you're fighting this almost external thing, like I'm taking out leukemia, right, to well, really I'm just waiting for my body to start recovering. And so really the past like 2 or 3 days is the first time I've had any extra energy to even really think about updating you guys about what's been going on. So yeah, chemo was a little bit weird because those symptoms and side effects were delayed. I thought that they would probably come on pretty quick, but apparently that's not how things work, and that's not true, because I didn't even start losing my hair till just a few days ago, maybe like a week ago now. And I had longer hair at the time, but again, I was just finding like clumps everywhere. And so I just decided like I was just gonna shave, because I mean literally there was hair in the shower, there was hair on all my, everywhere on my bed, hair in the room. Like it was quite the process, and I had already shaved my head actually in anticipation of this, so I don't know how bad it would have been. And honestly, I can't imagine being a woman going through that, because that's not as accepted in our society, right? Like for a man to be bald, like that's totally okay. But I couldn't imagine what it would be like to be a woman going through that process of losing their hair. I'm sure some people would be totally fine with it and others aren't. So yeah, kind of those were all the bad things that happened. I had a ton of good things that happened during that time. I mean, like my room is just literally full of stuff from people supporting us. So I mean, there was a lot of bad during chemotherapy. And it's just so interesting because the most like actual visible thing is I'm like bald now. So that's the thing that people see, and everyone notices first. So my wife got me this super amazing hat that says, it's a bright red hat, and it says, "Make my white blood cell count great again." So that's been a great hat. People on the floor have really loved it and enjoyed it. And yeah, so there's just a whole bunch of stuff that I got from friends and family, like tons of food and stuff, but really I haven't been able to eat any of it until really yesterday and today. Like I think yesterday was the first date that any of my like appetite came back, really up until this point. Like I was just having to force myself to eat, to remember that you have to do this, you have to have these nutrients, you have to have these calories, and the doctor's mantra is just like, any calorie is a good calorie. So they're like, we don't care what you have to eat, we don't care what sounds good, like just make sure you're doing it. And thank you, Heinzelmans, I really appreciate your love and light and prayers. So yeah, it's been quite the journey. Some points hellish, and other points, were reminders of just the incredible amount of love and support in my life, and the amount of people whose lives I've been able to touch, and people who have poured into my life. And it's been a really cool reminder there. I mean, it's definitely one of the best things about the process. And actually, like Caitlin's floor, 9 West Doan here in the hospital, sent over like a little basket with all these encouragements. And one of my favorites is this one. which says, "Some days are better, some days are worse. Look for the blessing instead of the curse. Be positive, stay strong, and get enough rest. You can't do it all, but you can do your best." And so that I've just like kept here on my desk because I love it, and like it's short, it's succinct, like it's easy to remember. You know, that like there will always be things that you can look for in life that are a curse or are negative, but like there's also always going to be positive things. And so I've tried to remember that, and I haven't always. It hasn't always been, you know, this super uplifting, like, oh man, it's so great to be here in the hospital. Some days it's been really hard, and but luckily, like as my numbers recover, because now literally we're just waiting for my white blood cells to recover enough to the point that I have my own immune system so that I can go home, because right now the hospital is effectively my immune system, because they give me antifungals, they're giving me antibiotics. You know, if I ever have a fever or anything, then they give you Tylenol, but like you're not actually allowed to take Tylenol unless they give it to you, because hey, you know, they want to know if you have a fever. And so yeah, that's kind of how things have been. My numbers have been slowly going up. My platelet count, right, the thing that does like the blood clotting, has like shot up, so that's been really good. They say that like platelets are one of the first things to shoot up, and then usually the other numbers start following, so that's been really encouraging. But yeah, I mean, one of the, you know, I don't know if you would call it unfortunate news, is that like we found out from like the fertility clinic that we'll probably have to do the more expensive form of IVF. So that's been a little bit hard for us, because really, you know, for Caitlin and me, there's nothing, you know, there's no greater blessing we can think of than to be parents. And so now like there's this huge monetary obstacle in the way of doing that, because it can be $25,000 or $30,000 to do IVF, and that may just be for 1 or 2 tries, and you know, you may not be pregnant from the first or second try. You have to do it multiple times sometimes, but sometimes it is the first time. So I don't know. We'll hope for the best and plan for the worst, but so if there's anyone out there watching this video that, you know, feels like, knows me and feels like, you know, this is what Evan has always wanted to do. Most people have known that, as be a parent, and, you know, and you feel so called, we would love to have your support in our GoFundMe. And I put a link to it in the description, to help us be parents. And, you know, and it's always weird to ask people for money, but like this is something I've always wanted to do, and so like I'm not ashamed to ask for help. Like I don't have any hesitations about asking people to help, because they've been asking, how can we help you and what can we do, and really right now, honestly, the answer at this point is money, because we want to be parents, and we'll probably have to do the most expensive form of, you know, IVF. Like we can't just do the more like natural one where they put the stuff in the dish and they hope it does its thing, but I can't tell you how much so far your guys' love and support has meant, and so I would love for you to continue support in that form to help us be parents. So I just thank you guys so much for everything you've done, and all the calls and cards. I mean, I have so many cards here, and all the encouragement, and people have sent balloons, and people have sent candy, like bouquet things, like an edible arrangement but of candy, and so I'm just totally, you know, my family and Caitlin's family have brought me food when I felt like, you know, nothing sounded good here at the hospital. You know, when I first started being able to eat, like the only thing I could eat was like ramen noodles, because that was the only thing that felt good going down, you know, when I still had really bad mucositis. I still have a little bit of it left, but not any like extreme level. So yeah, that's kind of the update of the good and the bad that's happened. And again, I just appreciate your support, and I love you guys, and I miss everyone out there. So thank you again for being awesome. And that's all I got. Hopefully I'll be able to have another update here for you soon, saying I'm going home, and you know, I get to just go lay on my couch and cuddle with my wife, which is where I should be and I'm meant to be. And you know, and if it wasn't COVID, she would have been able to be here with me this whole time, but she hasn't been able to because of COVID and all the admissions. So anyways, I love you guys. I hope you have a good night, and I hope to be able to update you guys again soon. So see ya.